Hello everyone, and welcome to this Tiny Tickers webinar. Whilst everyone's audio is connecting and getting yourself sorted, I shall just introduce myself and our speakers and run you through the format of what's going to happen tonight. This is the third webinar in a series of family support webinars that we are hosting. This one is all about your child with CHD beginning at nursery or school or any other childcare setting. It's a topic that comes up a lot in the Facebook forums that we run, different things like that. We know it's of concern to parents, so we thought we would put on this webinar. The previous two webinars, which were about supporting parental mental health and well-being, and also about traveling with babies with CHD, going on holiday, they're both available. The recordings of those are both available on our website. So if you would like to watch those back, if you haven't seen them, then the recordings are there. This webinar is being recorded, and we will be adding this webinar to our webpage as well. So if you need to disappear off halfway through, or you have any connectivity issues, you will be able to watch it back. A couple of shout outs. One is to Global Make Some Noise, who are the funders of this webinar series. And also, I would like to thank all of you who donated when you signed up. So many of you who are coming tonight have also made a small donation when you've got your tickets, and we're really, really grateful for that and grateful for the support. The webinar series is part of a menu of support that we offer to people. Many of you will be aware of our Facebook groups, of our parental booklets that we've got, of all the information resources available on our website. But if you don't follow us on social media, if you haven't had a good explore of the website, I would urge you to, because there's some really good content on there as well. The chat will be open all night. You can jump into the chat. Please do feel free to introduce yourself, tell us a little about yourself and your little one. Let us know where you're joining from tonight. Vicky from the Tiny Tickers team is in the chat as well, and we'll be putting links, documents and links to websites and different things like that in the chat throughout the night, so do keep an eye on that as well. If you do want to send us a message, there is a little box where you can tick either to everyone or just to the panelists, so just be aware of that and make sure you're sending a message to the right people. But if you want to say hello, then please do. My usual caveat on these things is that none of us are IT experts, and sometimes things go wrong. So if things do, please do bear with us. If you have any connectivity issues, you should just be able to rejoin with the original link that you joined from in the first place. Without any further ado, I shall introduce myself and our guests. So I'm John from Tiny Tickers. I have the great privilege and honour to be the chief executive of this wonderful little charity. I've got a 17-year-old daughter called Zoe, who was born with an AVSD. So that's my experience. I should also introduce Alice and Rachel. So Alice, do you want to just introduce yourself briefly and let everyone know who you are and your expertise?
Sure, yeah, thanks, John. So my name's Alice Wood. I'm one of the cardiac nurse specialists at Alder Hey Children's Hospital. And it's lovely to be here with you tonight.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Rachel Averson is also joining us. So Rachel, would you like to introduce?
Very formal, was that? It's lovely so many of you have come tonight. My name's Rachel Avison, and I work as a clinical psychologist in Leeds in the congenital heart unit for children and adults as well. And thank you ever so much for having me tonight.
Brilliant. So we're going to be hearing from both Alice and Rachel throughout the course of the night. We're going to start off with a video that we recorded, a few members of the Tiny Tickers team just chatting about this whole topic, because a lot of us have personal experience. So we thought that would set up the conversation really nicely. And then Alice is going to do a presentation for us. And then Rachel is going to talk through some of the issues from a psychological point of view as well. There is a question and answers box. Please feel free to fire any questions at us. The caveat I would say there is we're not able to give specific medical advice, obviously, about an individual case. But if you've got any questions that aren't answered during the course of the evening, we will come to those at the end of the night and answer as many of those as we can. We're hoping that the webinar should be done within about 45 minutes to an hour, something like that. And as I mentioned before, we are recording it, so we will send you a link to the video afterwards. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to navigate to the video that the Tiny Tickers team have recorded. It's just about 10 minutes long, and it will basically just set up the conversation. So the people involved in this were myself. I mentioned Zoe, who was born with an AVSD. We've got Nicola, whose daughter Isabella is now 12 years old. She has coaptation of the aorta, went through preschool and then on to school. Summer, whose little boy Jackson is 2.5. He's now at nursery. He was born with a right aortic arch and a vascular ring and a VSD. And we've got Gaynor, whose son Joel is 17. He was born with critical aortic stenosis, and he went through preschool and then on to school. So between us, we've got a bit of shared experience of these matters. So we thought that this would be a useful chat for you. We've got 10 minutes of the chat. Once we started sitting down, we ended up chatting for about half an hour. So we've edited about 10 minutes of the chat for you. Here you go.
It's clearly a nerve-wracking step for any parent, for any child to be going off to nursery for the first time or school for the first time, but even more so when you've been through a sort of traumatic experience. You've got your child with CHD, potentially they've had some surgery, potentially on medication, and got various other issues to consider. So I think the starting point for this introduction really is to talk about that practical side of it and how we found that summer. Do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, so a big thing on the practical side of things for us was to do with Jackson's eating. Because of his condition, he choked quite a bit on solid food and water and everything, really. So that was a big consideration for us with starting nursery. I think anything practical and sort of medical is just, you just have to be really open with them and just explain everything in good detail so they know what to expect. His nursery were brilliant. They run like a red plate service as such. So any child that has like a medical condition or even like dietary requirements, they have a red plate. And for him, he had one, which meant that he had to have a one-to-one with him when he was eating.
I think you've hit on a real good point there with the example you've given. It's about communication, isn't it? And I suppose the first point when you're choosing that setting in the first place, if it's a childminder or a nursery, I guess it's about finding out what they can provide, but communicating what your child needs. But communication is key here. Does that back up your experience, Gaynor, as well?
Absolutely. Joel didn't start any kind of setting until he was just over 3 years old. And I'd had him with me all of the time. And I needed to be really clear in my head that the care and the consideration around his condition was given exactly the same as what I would have given him at home, which sounds ridiculous because it was just me and him. So he always had me like a hawk around him. And these lovely people were looking after 30 kids. And some expectations of them, I suppose, was really, really high. But that initial meeting with them before he started, when I went in and I said, he's never been away from me, don't know what to expect. I need you to know all of this about him. And they were very much like, whoa, we look after kids with conditions. Talk to us about him. He'll be fine. Bring him in, come in with him. They were so great. They communicated so well. And every day when I picked him up, they gave me little bits of information about what he'd been doing. If he wasn't quite right, they'd call me. And he was only there for 3 hours a day. 3 hours was the longest 3 hours of my life, but it was the right thing for him. And absolutely communication and the trust that you put in them. If you've got that trust, I think it just makes it easy for everybody that you know that your child is being so well looked after. And it just makes it just gives you the confidence to leave them and to let your child thrive and develop in that environment.
Absolutely. And I remember when Zoe first started nursery, we did a document which was essentially her story with some pictures with some of the experiences she'd been through, so that anyone working with her would know that she'd been through the surgery, would know to look out for things like her scar from her surgery, but also the shape of her chest, because her wound was quite a pointed. She ended up with quite a pointed chest after her surgery. So it was things like that, just giving them that information from the very first meeting with them. So we did that in quite that informal way, but you can have more individual care plans, more of a formal document to set out what your child's needs are. And do you have experience of that as well, any of you?
When Isabella started her second primary school, they advised that we should set up an individual healthcare plan, and that was we then liaised with the school nurse, who was really, really helpful. And just it documents everything about their medical condition, any sort of practical tips about, what to look out for, like if they start feeling unwell, like how they would tell you, or signs that you would pick up on, like if they were really faint or dizzy, or started breathing like really too rapidly after exercise. And it's just a dialogue as to all the things that as a heart parent, that you store in your head, written down on a piece of paper, that you can give to somebody and discuss it with. So
and I guess the best within the world, you can build up a relationship with 1-2 members of staff, but there's going to be a range of people looking after your baby in most of these settings, unless it's an individual childminder. And potentially those staff will change as well. So to have all of that information documented is going to be better than just relaying it by speaking to someone, to have it all written down. And Gaynor, I think you've got experience of going through the individual care plan process as well.
They came to me and said, we need to put this plan into place. We need everyone to know exactly what's going on with him. So what his condition is he on any medicines? Who is his doctor? Who is his cardiologist? Do you have a liaison nurse? What should we look out for? And it's things like, I've still got the plan now, you know, will he go, do we need to look out for him going blue? How cold is he supposed to be? Because he used to be cold, but not freezing cold. He can't overheat. What would that look like? Is he trying to catch his breath after exercise, like what Nicola said? What can he take part in? It had all sorts of things in. Who is his main contacts? It was just a full picture of him.
And that has to be different for every child, because that is completely individual, isn't it? That's the name of it, is the individual care plan, because there's specific things to your child there. So
it's so true. But because they took that right from the outset and they were so in depth with it, and for an infant school, there was, I think, 350 pupils there, so it was quite a large school. But everybody knew about Joel. I mean, it wasn't the only one with health conditions, but everyone knew about him and they knew what to look out for. And on his care plan, it's got various teachers that were responsible for looking out for him, and the head ultimately was so brilliant with him. And I think right from day one, we had confidence in them, and that was the key.
And so, having gone through the process of choosing a nursery, how did you go about deciding which setting you were comfortable Jackson being in?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I wouldn't say I had lots of experience, because we only looked at a couple of nurseries that were close to us. I don't know, you just get a feel of when someone reassures you, I think, really. When we initially looked at Nursery, it was pre-surgery and he was on medication. So that was obviously a big concern at the time. And just speaking to them about that and just being reassured that, you know, they have trained staff who could help with that. I don't know, that all kind of stuff all made me feel quite comfortable. I think it was just the reassurance they gave that, you know, we will look after him and you don't need to worry. Like, we know, they do know what they're doing and you are putting your trust in them.
Yeah.
I think that's exactly what we went through with Zoe. We visited 2 or 3. You do have a gut instinct, don't you? Mm-hmm. And just basically being open and having the cards on the table that from meeting 1, this is Zoe, this is what she's been through, this is our needs. The fact that we're going to be more nervous about this than your average parent, can you reassure us? Mm. And I suppose also to be asking like loads of questions, to be firing loads of questions about them, about their staff's training and the background and things like that. And you come away with a feeling of, yeah, I felt comfortable there, or no, I didn't. So take your time, probably would be my advice. Deciding, do visit a few, even those ones you don't think you're going to probably send your child there. It's really useful for comparison purposes. Mm. The other aspect of this is that you've all been at home with your child, helping them through a fairly traumatic experience for you as a baby, and then suddenly you're handing them over to a different childcare provider, whether that's a school or a nursery. How did you find that from a mental health side of things, from a psychological well-being side of things? Gaynor, can I come to you first on that one? How did you find that once Joel finally went to school?
When it came to Joel and he was really, really poorly, there was just no consideration that I could have sent him to nursery. I was clinging on to him. It was mine. The thought of sending him just broke my heart. It wasn't just, he was very, very unwell and we weren't sure what his future was going to look like. So I didn't want to waste any time with him.
Yeah.
At the same time, there was just no way of comprehending that anybody could look after him and his needs at that time. So it was my health visitor who said to me, you know, he's 3 and he really needs to start socializing. And I'd always been able to say, but he'll get exposed to germs and it won't do him any good and he'll get really poorly, and he's always poorly anyway. She said he needs to do this. And I knew she was right. And it was awful. It was really awful. But I sent him to playgroup at 3 and he went for 3 hours a day. And they were really brilliant. I missed him so much. I worried about him so much. But gradually I relaxed into it. I think as a family, we all relaxed into it, knowing that it was in really good hands and he was thriving and developing. So it was hard. I won't pretend it, but it was the right thing to send him.
So I think it's a natural thing to find that hard, isn't it? That separation, particularly after you've been through a traumatic experience with surgery, if you've got that at the time in hospital. sending them to any childcare setting is a huge step. So I think that's the first point for anyone watching this webinar, is that it's completely natural to have that feeling of trepidation. But I think from all of our experiences, we're then glad that we have gone through that process. Would that be a fair thing to say, Summer? I can see you nodding there.
Yeah, 100%, definitely. I really struggled when Jackson first went, way more than I thought I would, to be honest. But I think he also struggled more than I expected him to. So it was really hard. But I think, Gaynor, you made a point there about through time, like it does just get better. Like, and it might take a couple of months, a few months, maybe longer, but it does get better. And like I say, now, yeah, he loves it, absolutely loves it. He doesn't even say goodbye to me. He
just runs off. They never look back, do they? They just run off.
There.
Bye then. You're left just by the door going, bye then, see you later. So is that just about familiarity and building that trust with the staff, which comes back to all the communication things we've always talked about?
Yeah, definitely. For us, 100%, I would say that.
I would just chip in there as well, that I can, that this is almost setting the template for their educational life. And it's good to know that from the outset, because I don't think I ever thought that far ahead.
Yeah.
And every setting has been the same process. And I think that's really good to know really early on, that this is just how you're going to be living their life. Wherever they're going, you're sending that information with them. You're growing those relationships of care with those providers to make sure that your child has the best experience.
Exactly. You're their greatest advocate, aren't you? So capture out all that information, write everything that you can down, all that information you want to give the setting, and then advocate for them and be that voice for them. And that was where you'll get to a place of comfort doing it. We've always been of the view that you celebrate those milestones. So as much as it's a scary thing, getting old enough to go to nursery, then getting old enough to go to school, but they're also a sign of how far she's come. And that's something to be celebrated and to be embraced as well.
Definitely. Yeah.
Brilliant.
We celebrate absolutely everything in our house.
Definitely. That's a really good piece of advice. Thank you. Right, well, thank you very much, everyone.
There we go. Thank you. Hopefully you found that really interesting and useful. That was it was a really interesting discussion, I think. For all of us, found that we went away and reflected on it quite a lot. And the two things that really struck me were, one, that it's totally natural to feel anxious about this, and secondly, that issue of communication, that a lot of that anxiety can be resolved with good communication with your childcare setting. As I mentioned, that was the short version. As you can see, we edited it down quite a lot. We are going to put the full 25-minute director's cut, if you would have it that way, available to you. Nicola in particular went on to discuss how we dealt with some issues once her daughter started school, particularly around tiredness, illness and attendance, which I think is really interesting. So if you'd like to watch the longer version, then that'll be a link that goes out to you tomorrow. I'm going to ask Alice to come back in now, Alice, and I'm going to hand over to you. I've just noticed you're on mute at the moment. Whilst Alice is stepping up at getting her presentation in order. There we go, it's up and running. Brilliant. I shall let you fire away then, Alice, and go through what you wanted to go through. Thanks very much.
Lovely. Thank you very much. I presume that it's all come up okay and you can see it. It was really interesting just to hear that then, because a lot of what was just said is actually going to feed into what I'm about to say, and this comes from, you know, the experiences that other people have, the questions that they come with us. So so thank you for the opportunity to having me, and for that start with that sharing. So firstly, I'm going to say what you've actually just been saying, and it is the acknowledgement that it is a huge step for your child to start nursery, for your child to start school, and that it does, as we've just heard, come with a lot of hopes, fears, questions, anxieties, and actually just going somewhere to seek out for your concerns and questions to be answered and acknowledged is a really helpful part of the process. I am the mum of 2 children that have gone through nursery and are currently in primary school, so I can absolutely say from my own experience, as well as those parents that I work with, that it's really normal to just feel all the feels with it, and that's just okay to acknowledge that. So we did touch on already a little bit about choosing the right setting. The accessibility of the setting is going to be a huge thing. So, for example, if you go and look around and see that your child is starting a nursery, that they're going to be on the 3rd floor, that they're going to have to go up and down stairs all day. And if your child gets very tired, it might be just that practically it's not the right place for in terms of how well they're going to be able to access the nursery. If your child has extra sensory needs and you find a nursery that has a lovely sensory room, that might be absolutely ideal for their individual needs. So just look at the accessibility of it as well. Communication is key, and actually what I'm going to say to you is trust your instincts, which I know a couple of the mums said, interesting enough, in the chat that we've just had, that actually if you get a good feel that someone is going to listen to the fact that you're saying my child has got a cardiac background and this is what it is, you might feel straight away sometimes that people really listen to that and know that they're going to be able to adapt for their needs. So do trust your instincts on that one as well. Once you have chosen your setting, what I would say is really get to know the school and the nursery staff. So it may be that I would say get to know the people that are going to be around your child as much as possible. You generally do get the opportunity to meet your child's school class teacher or to meet their key worker before they start. Find out the best way to communicate with them throughout the year. So it may be that their best way is through emails or through at the end of the day. So just ask what's the best way to keep that communication line going, because it's being said, but I'm absolutely going to repeat it, that communication throughout and ongoing communication is what's really going to help in ensuring that your child has the best possible experience. One of the mums as well did just identify then about how she had a particular issue that was her issue that was really concerning her about going into school or going into nursery. And what I would say is that there can be so much in your child's background or medical, and what can be really, really helpful to communicate with staff is to really think about what are your child's main key issues. Write those down before you go and speak to them. And then what you can do is then it gives you a really clear way of identifying those issues and then being able to work with staff to see how can we adapt, how can we meet those issues. So one example that I've touched on is if your child gets cold, particularly struggles with the cold, you can make sure that the staff are aware of that, and you can take in extra layers so they know that actually when they go outside to play, that your child will have a few extra layers than others. And it might be that if it gets very cold in the winter months, then the nursery or school just adapts this and says, well, at break time, your child can stay in with another child. So they're not feeling left out. It's still something for them to do, but they don't have to have quite as much cold exposure if it's there. If your child, for example, takes medication, then talking about it before they start will help us to identify which member of staff is going to help facilitate that while they're in the nursery or school setting. If they do struggle with tiredness, just making sure that you raise that issue and that you may well think about, actually, when I pick them up from nursery or school, I will bring the pram, even if they don't use it so much after all. Actually, just those few hours in nursery or a full day in school can really tire them out. So just knowing that you're going to take away that last 5 or 10 minutes of even walking to a car or however it is that you get home, that the minute they see you, they can just relax and that they can actually just sit down. So it's really identifying those key issues. So sport and PE is a big one. We get asked a lot of questions about this. And actually there is increasing research coming out just to show that there's incredible significant benefits of children, even the most serious of heart conditions, that if they get involved in regular exercise, and it doesn't have to be hardcore, it can be gentle exercise, but actually of the ongoing and both short-term and long-term benefits that exercise can have on children. So we absolutely do, where possible, want them to get involved in sports and in PE. We do find that some children do get tired, do get breathless. And so what we try to do is to work with the school to find a way of how they can be involved in things, but be able to rest when they need to. So for example, some of our children will have a chair that everyone knows is their chair. So let's say Billy, for example, loves to get involved with PE, but will get tired. Whenever the sport or PE is being done in the hall or outside, whichever the setting is, the teacher will always take a chair, and everyone in the class will know, well, that's Billy's chair. Billy can go and sit on it, no questions asked. No explanations. If he feels a bit breathless, he can sit on this chair, but then he's still there, he's still involved, he's still with everybody else. He can get straight back involved whenever he's ready to. So it's just finding ways to adapt and acknowledge that they can do sport, but they need to rest. There are certain conditions where we put a few limitations on that sport, and that would be particularly any children that are on anticoagulants or pacemakers or an ICD, where we don't want to risk too much bleeding or damage to the pacemaker. Then what we would usually say is to limit competitive contact sports or rugby. But we can speak with individual families about what that might look like for their child. Just wanted to touch a little bit as well about psychological issues. So we've said about how stressful it can be for parents starting school or nursery. Some children are absolutely not bothered by the fact that they've got a scar, for example, or that they've had a cardiac history. Some children, that is everything that they've grown up with, and it is not an issue to them, and that's absolutely great. For other children, that they can feel quite self-conscious about their scars, they can feel like they're a bit different from all of their peers, and we don't really want that. We don't want them to have to feel different. So we've got a couple of books that we do kind of encourage parents to read, and there's actually loads of books out there when you start looking, but one of them in particular we quite a lot of our families like using is called My Wonderline, and that is about all sorts of different scars. It's not even just about cardiac scars. So I know we've had some families where the teacher or the nursery teacher has actually read this out to the class fairly early on, just to normalize scars to the whole of the class, so that actually when they do get changed for PE in front of each other, if any child does notice it, sometimes nobody will notice it, anything at all, but if it does get noticed, it's just really encouraged to be really, really proud of themselves, of what they've gone through, of what they've achieved, and for other children to know that scars are such an incredible sign of just being a fighter and getting through things. We know that that has actually been really helpful for some families. So extra support in school, and for quite a lot of our cardiac patients, these children don't necessarily need any extra support than what is in there already. So it is really very individual of what children need. What most nurseries and schools will do is do what we call a graduated response. So let the child start after talking with yourselves about what they do need, and gradually increase the levels of support if they do feel that they need it. I know we've touched on care plans slightly. So children can have what we call an individual care plan that we as cardiac nurse specialists absolutely can work. I'm more than happy to work with nursery settings or school settings to do this. So for example, we will do care plans for children who are on anticoagulants, who have a complex cardiac condition, or have a pacemaker or an ICD in situ. And what that does is it just brings up just details of the child's cardiac history, if they've been through any surgery, and what to look out for in terms of symptoms, anything to be aware of, and when to ask for help. So we can help with developing those care plans for individuals. Again, I'm going to say that ongoing communication, because things can change, things in your history can change. And then if your child does need any extra support, extra than that, if your child has got any extra additional needs, for example, or if they end up needing a one-to-one to support them through, what we do is the school or the nursery will start an educational healthcare plan. That is different from the individual care plan that we can work with, that anyone can have. And this is something that the school will take to the local authority. You can actually see what's available in your area with the local authority by looking up your school's, your area's local offer. So for example, in my area, I would just type into my Google search Liverpool local offer, and it will show what is available in my area for extra needs for disabilities in the area, and what can be put in place for children. And that is something, if you do end up needing an educational healthcare plan, that the educational setting will help you with and guide you through. But as I say, not everybody will need quite so much detail in this. Just wanted to put a little bit in about supporting staff as well. So I know it was highlighted earlier that actually if your child goes into a school setting, for example, they could be 1 out of 30 children in that class. So what can be really helpful is actually to just do a summary of your child's needs. So some of our children have like a laminated piece of paper or card that can go into their classroom with them. So they will have a teacher, they will have a teaching assistant, but they may well have other people in covering breaks. So a quick summary of the really important bits of information that staff who might just see them briefly might find really helpful to know. So for example, if you have a child who normally has SATs that are lower than normal, it'd be really important to put on a piece of paper, you know, my child Billy, normal SATs are above 75%. He does get a bluish tinge if he's feeling run down, or if he's cold, bluish tinge to the lips, and he's allergic to penicillin. And it just means that anybody who walks into that room, if there's any issues with that child, then they can see that straight away. They don't need to go looking for a care plan, or they don't need to be the person that's usually there regularly. And so if there was some kind of emergency or school, or your child did have an issue where you needed to get, say, paramedics in and they arrived before yourselves did, then they have that laminated card straight away that they can see without all the teachers having to panic about what is all the details. That's the important details there for anyone to see. In addition to that, if you find your child is having quite a few complex needs and a lot of things start to change with their medical history, one thing that some of our families find helpful is to have a diary which goes between school and home and stays in their school bag or nursery bag. And what that means is if staff are picking things up in school or nursery, they can just write things in the diary. And for yourselves, if anything's changed or come up at home, you can write in the diary. And that just takes away sometimes having to stay for ages at the end of the day, trying to find out what's happening, or explain changes. That can be really helpful for children that have got a few changing needs. The other thing I'd say is that everyone should have a cardiac nurse specialist within their area, and that actually you can give out the helpline number for that. So we do talk to school staff if they do want to know a little bit more about the child's condition that they're going to look after. What I would just say as well is if your child does have a single ventricle heart condition, then we do help with care plans, but also I would recommend the Little Hearts Matter website, because they have a booklet that is designed for teachers, for nursery staff, just to help them to look after specifically children with single ventricles. So I'd definitely look at that if your child is in that category. The other thing I just wanted to share is that there's plenty of resources out there for more information, for things about schools, for supporting. So I've shared some of those on here, if in case you did want areas to particularly look up for. But overall, what I would say is good luck to all of you, and just I hope that you enjoy the experience of the school or nursery setting. So thank you for listening.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for that, Alice. That was a 10-minute presentation packed with about 3 hours of top tips and expert advice. So I really appreciate you putting that together for us. Loads of stuff resonated with me that you were mentioning there. I think building a relationship with your key worker and your Senko really jumped out at me. That's something that certainly benefited us over the years. And perhaps the point that just really hammered home to me is use people like yourselves. The nurse specialist team are there to help and have this wealth of experience and information. And I see there's a point that Sophie's made actually in our chat that that's exactly what we would recommend for you, Sophie, with that situation you described, is to speak to your nursing team and to get that support and get that care plan written and in place. So yeah, do use your nurse specialist, definitely. You mentioned a couple of really brilliant books. Both those books you mentioned, we've actually worked with the authors of those books. So a big shout out to Gemma and Vicky, who wrote My Wonderline and the other book that you mentioned as well. And a little plug here, particularly if you buy a copy of My Wonderline, there's a donation to Tiny Tickers with every purchase made. So thank you for slipping that one in there. And Vicky's popped in the chat as well. You mentioned an emergency sort of information poster. We are going to send out a version of that everyone who's watching the webinar will be able to download in the resources we send out in the days following this webinar, and you'll be able to edit that with your own child's details as well and give that to the healthcare setting. So yeah, loads of really brilliant stuff there. So thank you so much, Alice. Rachel, can I come over to you then to just discuss the sort of psychological side of this huge issue in a little bit more detail as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Alice. Thanks again. That was really good. Yeah, when I was thinking about this presentation, I was thinking what are the kind of key points that I can pop into the 10 minutes. And I was thinking about splitting it into two sections. So the first section is about what's anxiety provoking and unsettling for babies starting nursery and children starting reception. And then for the second half, to think about you as parents and carers and what's incredibly difficult for you in handing your child over, like Gaynor said in the introductory video, just how heartbreaking that can be and how hard that can be. So I'll start by talking about some babies. And I was thinking about separation anxiety. So separation anxiety you may already be aware of, but it's a really normal part of child cognitive development. So it's part of being a human and developing completely normally. It can peak at different times for babies. Babies develop at very, very different rates and levels. But what we know kind of generally is it can start around 6 months and it can start to peak, but all the way through up until about 18 months. So what separation anxiety is your baby learning that I'm separate from my mum and my dad or my carer. I'm my own little person, and actually the world is quite a big and scary place. And you might start to see that when you leave the room, they become fussy, they might cry, they might put their arms out to be held. They might not do any of these things, and that's okay. And it might be that they're distracted by a toy or something, but you'll start to see it peak through babyhood. And like I said, that can start from 6 months, but it can be all the way through until 18 months. And why that's really hard for starting nursery is if you think about when kind of maternity leave ends after 9 months to a year, or after you feel like you'd like your child to start in a childcare setting. I know some families do that with the free hours that are coming in now. But that tends to be just around the time that separation anxiety peaks. So it's really hard, because what you might find is when you hand your baby over, you're going to get these really big normal responses, but they're very, very hard as parents and carers to observe and to see. And again, going back to what Gaynor said, when you see your little one reaching their hands out to you or crying or being very, very upset, all you want to do, sorry, her little boy was with her till he was 3, but all you want to do is scoop them up and kind of run away. And it's because it's triggering our threat system. So your baby's in threat mode, where they feel stressed, naturally and normally stressed because they're away from their carer. They'll have some adrenaline that releases into their body. So you might notice that they feel, or they get quite tight or tense. They can have a release of cortisol, that's a stress hormone. And yeah, you'll see the signs that they're feeling stressed. And that's really, really hard, isn't it, to think that your baby with a congenital heart defect or disease is struggling and experiencing stress. However, what we do know is that trusted caregivers, and that doesn't have to always be us, can soothe and settle babies. And staff in nurseries are very, very well equipped at being able to soothe and to care and to nurture children, to help regulate those physiological responses. But what we do need to do is help prepare them for that. So I think, again, on the 10-minute video, Summer was saying it does get better with time, and that's something we know. So when we observe babies starting nursery, we know that kind of day 1, day 2, day 3, week 1, week 2, week 3, right the way through, it can be like a heartbreaking separation between parent or carer and baby, and it will start to settle in time. But there are things that we can do to help that. I was also going to say separation anxiety, that what we know from research and studying children, looking at child cognitive processes, is it can peak again around 3 to 4. And again, that's really, really hard when we think about young children starting preschool or school. And what's going on for them, unlike babies where they know that they're starting to learn that they're separate from their carer, is they're learning that they have some independence, that they can be left, that they can do things on their own. And again, it's really normal. They're experiencing that their brain wiring is knowing, I'm separate, the world is a big place, I can do these things, but I don't quite know how to do these things. So when we think about children starting school and nursery, preschool and school, know that there's a really significant peak in separation anxiety around that time as well. And that can make starting school incredibly, incredibly hard. Research does tell us that children who have been to nursery or preschool for any amount of time do settle a little bit quicker in school. But don't be too worried if your child has stayed with you right the way through until age 4, age 5, and then is going on to start reception this September or next September, you can still give them experiences of being away from you, and it's likely that they'll have had some experiences of being away from you. One key place might be hospital, where they've had to adjust to having nursing staff care for them, where you've not been able to be around all the time. But it might be that you've got trusted adults in your family, grandparents, aunties, uncles, really close family friends that offer to have your child for a little amount of time. And it's natural, isn't it, when they've gone through such difficulties in their early life, that you want to keep them close. And it's a feeling of nobody knows my child like I do. But if you can start by letting them be with trusted adults for little pockets of time, it might be that you're in the same room and then you start to retreat away a little bit, or you go upstairs, or you go for a walk around the block and then come back. But it's a real process of adjustment for the babies, the children, and yourselves. So I guess that's the top tip, really, is whether your child's been to preschool, nursery, or they haven't, whatever it is that they're moving on to, try to practice a transition and a saying goodbye. So the number one thing, so practice being separated. And I know that's really hard and it'll feel like really difficult advice. Children, you might see them experience that stress response, but know that they can be soothed. And it has been you for a long, long time, but we can allow other trusted adults, nursery staff, teachers, teaching assistants, Senkos to be the people that soothe those children. And very quickly, children are quite black and white, aren't they? They think in very black and white terms. They learn that wasn't very nice and it was stressful, but my needs were met and I was quickly soothed. So yeah, number one thing, practice as much as you can, practice over the summer, and build it up as well in incremental stages. So it might be that you just leave for 5 minutes and that feels anxiety provoking for you, but build it up and up and up and up and up. And if you can, an hour, 2 hours, an afternoon, a morning, fantastic. Yeah, and really, really praise the baby or your young child for what they have done. But yeah, practice leaving your child. I know it sounds difficult advice, but it really will help you know that they can do it. And also for you to not do it on that first day of school or that first day of nursery, to think, I've seen them, I've seen their stress response, whatever it is that's unique for that child, but I've also seen them be comforted and soothed. The second thing is to tell them what's happening. Never underestimate the power of talking to a baby as well, even as young as 6 months. And it's really clear, simple instructions. Mummy's going to leave you with Auntie Claire, and I'm going to go for the morning, and I'm going to come back. Mummy will come back. And then try to cuddle, kiss, not a prolonged cuddle, but really clear. This is the boundary. This is what's happening, and then follow through with it. And the chances are you will feel in that threat mode, in that stress response, you'll notice a hit of adrenaline. You might want to cry. You might feel really overwhelmed. You might actually feel quite calm until you leave, and then you sort of worry about them. Whatever your response is, it's normal, and it's because you haven't had experiences of being away from them. But yeah, tell them really, really clearly what's happening. As a psychologist, we do work with people in Leeds at the hospital with this, and sometimes families will say, we found starting school difficult, and we didn't tell them they were starting school. We said we were going to the soft play, or we said we were going to do something fun, and then it's really, really difficult when children don't know and aren't understanding what's happening. So talk about it. And if your child is starting nursery, preschool, or reception this September, yeah, talk to them about it. And point it out if you go past in the car. That's where you're going to preschool. That's where you're going to be starting school. Be really clear. You'll wear a uniform, or you get to have this for your dinner, or any information that you can share. Start building that story and that narrative about what's going to happen as much as you can, because it also invites an opportunity for questions. Obviously, younger children aren't going to be able to verbalise those questions, but yeah, bigger children of age 4 and age 5 will be able to quite clearly explain what happens, and it really invites that to and fro process of conversation and communication. I think John was saying communication so important with childcare settings, but so important with your child as well. So keep talking. We naturally avoid, don't we, when we feel anxious about something, and it feels like the elephant in the room. Can't go there, can't talk about it. But yeah, please do draw it out, write it out, act it out. Put the uniform on, have a practice of going to school. This is what it'll be like to go in the schoolroom, and we'll go in the buggy, or we'll go on the bus, or we'll go in the car. And yeah, it's like dress rehearsals really, but so helpful. And again, if your child's very, very little, a young baby, you're very welcome to organise settling in sessions with nursery. So again, it's really lovely to build that up, and it might be that you go for an hour and you're with them, then you go for 2 hours and you're with them, and you build it up. And some nurseries have a specified timeline of what they feel is appropriate and that might look like. But if you need to do double the length of time, that's okay, and you're welcome to ask for that. I know with my little boy Max, I did a very, very prolonged settling in session, because it just took him a bit longer, and I didn't feel comfortable kind of jumping from an hour to 2 to then sort of saying goodbye. So that was probably about me, but I asked for some more time, and the nursery were more than happy to offer extra settling in sessions. So don't hesitate to ask. The third thing, it's really lovely if you can give your child an object from home, because it's called a transitional object. So it's something that's important to me at home, but I can also have it in this childcare setting. So for very little babies and children, it might be a comforter, it might be a blanket, something that's very tactile, that feels really nice and is a reminder of home. You might need to double up and buy double bunnies or double blankets or something, but get them used to it at home, and then let them transfer to the early years childcare setting with that. Some families, like you might do with the baby bonding squares, wear them, so wear it so it smells, so it's got the scent of mum or dad or carer. But you can also do this with older children as well. Again, my little girl, when she started reception, we were told don't bring toys in or don't bring teddies and comforters, and that felt quite stark, really. But I was adamant I wanted her to have something that's your thing from home. So her thing was she snuck a teddy in, but it was a key ring on her school bag. So yeah, chose a teddy, went to buy it together. That became her special school teddy. Would kiss it goodnight. Lots of play and role play about you're going to school with your teddy. But it was a clip-on key ring that she took, and obviously school were fine with that. But if it is that your child really, really wants to take something that's comforting or soothing into school or their preschool setting, just ask. And schools have to sometimes be flexible about what they're offering and what they're doing. So yeah, by all means ask. The next tip is make saying goodbye a really positive experience. Now, this is a really hard one. As a parent or carer, like I was saying, we talked about the stress response and feeling in threat mode, and it's a really uncomfortable and horrible feeling. So your body's kind of going into, this is horrible, I want to scoop my baby up, my child up, I want to hold them. You're kind of having to go against the grain of a lot of normal biological processes. You might feel that churny, knotty feeling in your tummy, and it's the physiological responses in your body in response to adrenaline and to cortisol. And it's, you have to really kind of go against that. So I know for my daughter's first day at school, I did wear sunglasses. It wasn't the hottest day, but I felt like I knew I was going to get a bit emotional, and I thought, I'm not going to let her see that. But it's trying to mask in that moment how you're feeling, which is really, really hard to do. But then give yourself that breathing space afterwards. So it's a really lovely, warm, smiley, engaging hug, goodbye, and again about that clarity about what's happening. Mummy's going. I will come and pick you up. I will be back at the end of the school day. I will be back at the end of when I've finished work. I'm here to pick you up from preschool. So really clear, big cuddle, big kiss, lots of love, and then move yourself back a little bit and move yourself away. And the reason we don't recommend that prolonged hug and that prolonged goodbye is that children feel like this is scary. This is something really scary. Mummy's clinging on to me. I'm not safe, and yeah, they pick it up. They pick up our anxiety as well, so they can feel our sort of hearts beating as well, and absorb some of that stress like osmosis. So yeah, it's a really clear, lots of love, goodbye, big cuddle, and then try to move yourself back a little bit. And sometimes it's okay to wave from a distance or wave through a window, and then move yourself away. And that's when you can let yourself experience whatever it is that you're feeling in that moment. You know, some families do feel quite calm and they're like, that went better than expected, but other families, it's very, very normal when you've gone through a lot of difficulty and some really traumatic early life experiences with your baby or child to feel very churned up. So give yourself some breathing space to just go and have a cup of tea. Don't go to work, don't dial into any meetings, go and sit and just have some time for yourself, and yeah, soothe yourself, because that's so important. And that might be some really deep breaths. It might be, you know, grounding technique, sort of looking what you can see in nature, what you can spot. It might be distraction, you know, ringing someone, ringing your partner, ringing a friend, having a debrief and going, oh, that was awful and stressful. But just to reassure you, we have huge feelings as adults. evolved and we're complex and we have, we worry about everybody. But it's really important to remember that young children and preschool children don't hold on to those thoughts as well. Like I said earlier, they're very black and white, they're quite concrete, they're in the moment. They might see a lovely smiling teacher and that's enough for them to feel reassured and to feel calm. So it's okay to let them have difficult feelings, but don't think that they're thinking what we're thinking, if that makes any sense. Quite a confusing statement, but we're holding so much in our heads and actually they're not. They're quite, in the moment. They're very mindful children, aren't they? And there might be things that they're excited about. And it might be that you said they could have custard for dinner, or that there's a slide in school, or it might be that they get to have, and there's a teddy bear in the classroom. All those things are really, really exciting for children. And if you can hook them in, they park those thoughts. And you'll have seen it with hospital appointments. You know, some children cope incredibly well with hospital appointments because you can hook them in and find something that they can cope with. But yeah, remember that we're hardwired and resilient enough to experience a whole range of emotions. Children experience a range of emotions and we have to let them feel them. And we can buffer them so much, but sometimes, I think it was said on that 10-minute talk at the beginning, we have to set the way for their kind of future education, that we can't always be with them. And it's incredibly hard. And I kept hearing the word normal. It's normal. It's normal for us to feel distressed, very distressed, and overwhelmed and frightened about this process. But you're doing the right things. You've joined the call tonight. You're listening. You're equipping yourself with information and top tips, and keep practicing and keep talking. You know, let other families on the Tiny Tickers groups support you through it, because you all go through very, very similar things and experiences. So that's where Tiny Tickers really is wonderful, because it'll provide a brilliant network where you can post questions or share your frustrations, or just vent a little bit about, I said goodbye to my little one on their first day of preschool and it was really bad and we both cried, but it's okay, they will get there. And time is a wonderful thing, and the repetition and them finding a secure staff member or key worker that they feel really comfortable with, in time those bonds will start to form. And know that actually it's a sign of a lovely bond that you've got with your child. When they do get upset, they love you and they want to be with you, and that's a sign of a really secure attachment. And so hold on to that. You know, if you do see that they're struggling, you're finding it difficult, know that actually you've laid some fantastic foundations for their future, and they have a lovely bond with you. I'm really mindful of time, so I'm going to stop talking and allow some time for Q&A, but hopefully that's covered a few things that people wanted to get out of tonight.
Thank you so much, Rachel. That very last point about this is reflective of the lovely bond that you've established with your child is such a nice point to finish that on. I would say that the point about custard for dinner, my 17-year-old daughter still gets very excited every day that it's custard for school dinner. So it can be something as little as that has them jumping into school or nursery and not even bothering to wave goodbye to you at the school gates. Some really practical advice there. I thought what you were saying about building up to that separation was really important, and a brilliant takeaway, to just do that in little stages and get used to that separation before suddenly first day at nursery or school or whatever it might be. That was a brilliant one. And also about the transitional object to take and have a spare one of those transitional objects in case it gets lost. If it's a little bunny or something like that. I mean, the reassuring thing there is that all of these feelings are completely normal, and we've seen that throughout the discussion tonight, haven't we? So if you are struggling with these feelings, be kind to yourself as well, because we all have them and it is all completely normal. You mentioned a couple of sources of support there, which I will mention actually that Tiny Tickers provide. So we've got a Facebook group, a private Facebook group, which has got hundreds, if not thousands, of members these days. So an absolutely brilliant place to go and get peer support. So if you want to type any questions in there or experiences or anything like that, you will suddenly be met with all sorts of advice and tips from other parents who have been there and done it as well. So I can't recommend that Facebook group enough if you're not already on there. I know Vicky's put a link to that in the chat. And also we run a number of peer support groups over Zoom, which Rachel's kind enough to host some of those as well. And that could be another brilliant forum for talking about these sorts of issues with other parents who are going through the same things at a similar time to you as well. So do look those up. You'll be able to find details of those Zoom support groups on our website as well. We'll move into some question and answers. We've got a few questions there. Alice, if you're still around, if you could come back in as well, and we'll do our best to answer any questions. There's still time to pop a few more in there. One that I can see immediately in the Q&A is whether or not a child could go to nursery with an NG tube. Is that something, Alice, you might be best to talk about that maybe?
Yeah, so we definitely have some of our children that we know that do go to nursery with NG tubes. What I would say about that is very into the individual nurseries though. So it's just getting that communication and asking before you go if that's something they can accommodate. What they would probably do in that situation is just make sure that the staffing ratio is just a little bit more specific for that child so that they know. And they probably will just want a little bit more information, but there's definitely nurseries out there that do accept children with NG tubes. Yeah.
Absolutely, it's not that uncommon a thing, I suppose, to have a child with an NG tube these days. So there will be people in nurseries who are either being trained or can be trained, and discuss that with them. That's really good suggestion. Care plans is coming up a few times in questions. I mentioned one before. We've got another one that's around a care plan for a child that is pre-surgery as well. So I guess that just comes back to the point that we've made, that talk to the cardiac nurse specialist team at your unit. They'll help you write that care plan. Is that fair to say, Alice?
Yes, yeah, and I have just responded privately to that, Mum. So we will definitely help people that want care plans, and it is good to know, because I know there's another mum on the group that I've just seen said who she was at the beginning. And actually, if you are already known to a particular hospital, just get in touch with them before you start, because it might be that your child you don't particularly need one, or it might be that it is something we can definitely help you with. So it's always worth asking. Yeah.
There's a question about school trips, and do we let people go on kids go on school trips? Just speaking as a parent, we did. What we would have in place was extra meetings with the school ahead of school trips, and that built up from very quick little trips that they do when they're very little, through to the all singing, all dancing, adventure activity, 3 nights away type breaks they have when they're a little bit older at primary school. What we found is we had meetings with the key worker, with the teacher, with the Senko at the school. They did risk assessments. They just basically spoke to us about what Zoe would need to have in place to make that success. And we felt it was really important that we did try to get her to go on those, so that she was interacting with the peers and having those same experiences. But I guess, again, probably looking at you with this one again, Alice, it's going to be down to the individual situation, the individual case, and what that trip is going to involve, basically, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely, John. And I think, and just echoing everything that you've said, really, that we would love the children to be able to get involved if they can, but absolutely that communication before, and just seeing that all their needs are going to be provided, and actually just making sure that they're going to go somewhere actually that is not too far away from a local hospital if needed, and that you are going to have reception on your phone. So sometimes you can go to kind of bizarre places that are out. So it's actually just checking some of the practical things. And I know that we've had parents that have just driven to where they're going on purpose just to check what's nearby, what's happening, can I get a reception on your phone, and is there somewhere? And actually what some places would potentially let you do is, especially if it's younger children, is actually let you accompany them on the trip at first when they're younger, and kind of build up to that.
Particularly if there was some significant medication needed and things like that, I guess that would be quite common as well. So again, it's just a case of discussing the needs with the school, and taking it one step at a time. Some other questions come in. Someone's popped in the chat that we currently have a chicken pox going around our nursery. Are there any extra precautions for bugs that children with CHD would need to take? Again, I'm looking at you with all these questions, Alice. You're getting an easy time here, Rachel.
Yeah, no, this is a challenging one, and we do have this question because absolutely bugs do go around nursery, and part of the benefits of nursery is that actually you do get a bit of exposure to, and it's just trying to get that balance of, you do want children to be able to build up their immune system, but actually if they are struggling, it can be something that does throw them over, that they might need to have a hospital admission. So you do have to kind of go into this knowing that your child is more likely to need a bit more support if they do catch them. And that is something that actually why some people do opt to wait till they are a little bit older, and they're more likely to go when they're 9 months one rather than start sooner than that, just so that, you know, actually by the time you're one, you are a bit more robust, you can manage these things. And if there is something particular like chickenpox that you are concerned about, some parents opt to take them out for a while it goes round, but to be honest, by the time you know chickenpox is there, you often have had the exposure to it anyway. So it's just being aware that actually, if these things happen, that your child may well just take a little bit longer to recover from that than they do. But we wouldn't tell you not to do it because of it. And we do need them building up their immune system as well. So it can be a tricky balance. If your child has been unwell for a while, we would say leave it a bit longer before they go back. So if they've recently just had surgery, we do give them a bit of time to make sure they're at full strength to then be able to cope better with these bugs. And if you have just had a recent illness, we'd say just take your time sending them back again to make sure that they are fully recovered to full strength, not going to catch something when they're already run down.
And that illness, I think I mentioned earlier, that illness and absence from school and different things like that was something that we went into further in the chat that we had as a staff team. So if you do watch a longer version of that chat, it's a topic we cover in there as well. And the other question I can see at the moment is around snacking advice, perpetual snacking. So our toddler eats every 30 minutes throughout the day, and nut-free, high-calorie snacks are a nursery no-no. I'm running out of high-calorie, nutritious snacks that are suitable. Also, will this be okay in a school setting? So there is some snacking needs there, some different nutritional needs that some of our children have. I guess that's, again, it's that discussion with the school, and potentially, I know in my own experience, school speaking to the nursing team at some points to explain from a medical point of view that some children will have different nutritional needs. Is that fair to say, Alice?
Yeah, and it is actually something that we put on our care plans as well, about the importance of food and getting calories in, and that actually some children might take a little bit longer to eat, and just enabling them to have slightly longer to actually get food into them than others. Sometimes you might find that nurseries in particular will help to give ideas of snacks, because sometimes they have different things than you'd necessarily think of to have at home, which can be helpful. But it's an individual setting thing as well, because some of them will say, you know, you are welcome to bring in some extra snacks from home. Other settings don't really like you bringing in too much from home and will be wanting to provide it themselves. So it really is a discussing that, talking to them, and then we can back that up with care plans as well if needed.
Get it written into the care plan. Brilliant. Thank you so much. I think that's all the questions I can see. If Vicky is in the chat, can shout out with point any other questions my direction if I've missed anyone. But assuming I haven't, I'm going to start wrapping things up. What I would be really grateful if everyone who's attended, I'm just going to pop a little poll, a feedback poll, up on screen. Hopefully people can see that now. Just 3 questions. It's really short, really sharp. Just gives a little bit of feedback, which will help us tailor the future webinars that we do, because as we mentioned, this is one of a series, and we want to help make some great webinars on topics that you would like to hear about. Basically, we will be asking you to complete a longer feedback survey, which again goes to our funders and really helps ensure that we can be doing more of this. So when we email you in the next couple of days, if you could take a look at that feedback survey, it would be really, really super grateful. I guess in summary, just to sort of kind to encapsulate everything that we said, which was an awful lot in the hour that we've been going. The first thing that jumped out at me is it's really natural to have these feelings and to be nervous about this. This is a big step, and we can acknowledge that. But there are some practical ways of dealing with that. Communication with the setting that your child's going to is absolutely vital, and also make use of people like the cardiac specialist nurses. That's probably a good starting summary. And I think coming back to one of the very first things in the team chat that we had, we all kind of just said we found this hard, but we also all said it gets better with time, and all of our children have absolutely benefited from being through nursery, through preschool, from school, some of them now into high school. So your child will settle in and they will thrive. I hope people can take that as some reassurance. We're going to follow up with a link to the video, loads of handouts, signposting, and other links that are useful to you. So keep an eye out for that. As we mentioned, please feel free to follow us on social media, to join the various groups, sign up for Zoom support groups, whatever support you need. You can find out loads more about our work at www.tinytickers.org. I'd like to say a massive thank you, Alice and Rachel, for your time and for sharing your expertise and your skills. That was absolutely awesome. And also for everyone in the Tiny Tickers team who contributed to the webinar in any way, shape or form as well. And to Global Make Some Noise for funding this series of webinars. The last thing I'd like to say is we put this timing on because we're conscious that the new school year is starting. People will be going to nursery, going to school. We would love to see your first day pictures. So please do jump on social media and tag us in, and we'll join our Facebook group. And good luck with it all. I hope it goes really well for all of you, and send us those first day pictures. In the meantime, have a brilliant evening and summer. And thanks very much for joining tonight. Goodbye, everyone.